Nick, help me welcome Stu Geddes, too.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I know it's been a long day, so I'll try and keep this as brief as I can. I'm sure you want to have a few quiet drinks later on just to rehydrate. Okay, on the ground at the coalface, I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview on my experiences there. Most of New Zealand became aware fairly quickly of the February earthquake at 12:51, either by feeling it or by radio or TV communications. South Island Building Control Officers, which is where I'm based down in Alexandra there, responded immediately on an individual basis by driving to Christchurch. And this is pretty much in just council cars, and we got there as quick as we could. It was interesting, when we left about 5 o'clock on at that night, and it's about a 6-hour drive. By the time we got into Christchurch, it was dark. We didn't know where we were staying. And before we'd left, my wife said, "Please don't stay on the 12th story of a high-rise building." I didn't get the 12th story, I got to the 11th. It was a second from the top. But the problem was that the building we're staying in, because the lifts were out of action, we actually had to take the stairs. So we had to take the stairs right up to the 11th floor. And it was quite a concern going up the stairs and all the precast concrete, looking at the cracks that were in it. And we think, this isn't probably that good. And then by the time we got to the top and we're walking around, there was cracks in the floors with it, and they'd rolled back the carpet just to have a quick look. So it's probably a lesson that if you're going to be sending all your rescue people into a situation like that you don't actually want to put them in danger in hindsight. So a bit of a learning from that one. By the time the February earthquake came around, we were a lot more prepared for it, and as Nick spoke about how we sort of went through the process there. And we undertook approximately 72,000 rapid assessments in 10 days. That's a lot of buildings to get round, 10 to 15 minutes, just rapid assessments. And the focus was upon whether buildings could be safely used for shelter, or at least in the short term. And what we're doing, we're actually encouraging people to stay in their houses. They didn't have any water or sewerage, but we had nowhere to put them. So it was better that they were in a home with at least some essentials that they could use, as opposed to trying to find another place for them. We identified buildings that should not be used for occupation, and we placed the appropriate placards, whether they're green, yellow or red. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on. And we provided support to the people affected. Daily grind. First up in the morning was an update briefing on the situation and change procedures. That was about 7 o'clock in the morning. All the building officers were briefed on certain matters and appointed as team leaders for their group. We picked up our documentation, prepared to get to our assigned areas out in the eastern suburbs. Out of the west, have to go through the CBD area, heading towards our destination suburbs. Devastation was rife. It was like someone had dropped a bomb in that CBD area. It was horrific. There was just devastation everywhere. Because of the devastation, it took us nearly an hour to get out to our designated suburb area that we're going to be doing our assessments on. And it's hard to explain how nervous you are while driving out to a task like this. You just don't know what you're going to find when you get there. We got quite a lot of pretty large aftershocks we experienced. Many thought it wise to leave a voicemail message for my wives and family detailing where we're going, which street, the names of people we were with in their groups, just to be safe in the unfortunate event of having to come back for people looking for us. And actually it was more concerning for the families when they actually got the message. And could you just flick on, please? Inspections of individual properties were the task at hand. First, trying to identify whether someone was at home, whether anyone was injured or requiring assistance. Respectfully, thinking that this is still someone's home. Only about 25% occupancy, given it was a hard-hit area, and many people appeared to have left in a hurry. The welfare team, talking to and ensuring occupiers and homeowners were all right, running through a questionnaire, collecting information, and basically being reassured. And with those teams and that, like we had a building officer and a welfare officer, an EQC officer, and although we were doing rapid assessments with our building control hats on, we were also dealing with the emotions of the people there as well. So we're actually probably a second welfare officer, and just we're actually probably the first people that, of any officialism that these people had seen in 2 days. So it was a fairly emotional time, something I won't forget. Working on a pretty tight time frame, around 10 to 15 minutes per property. And that's probably, and the reason we had to do that because we just had so many to get through. In many cases, it didn't require an internal inspection, depending on what we found. We could just do a quick walk around the house, and it was pretty obvious by tapping on the windows there was no one home. The doors were open, people had fled, gone elsewhere, and there was probably not much damage. So a lot of them we could get through fairly quickly, others took a lot longer. Hazards to look out for were like falling debris from roof tiles, collapsing retaining walls around the property, dislodged gas cylinders and supply lines. Next, please. And this is an example of some of the placards. Some of our previous speakers have had these placards, and we had our green one, which was being inspected, no restriction on use or occupancy. The yellow, which was restricted use, no entry except on essential business, but parts may be lived in. And red was unsafe, do not enter or occupy. Interesting, in that red one, do not enter or occupy, we did have a couple of situations where out-of-town landlords actually came in and they were renting these houses out and actually took the placards off. So it was fairly sad sort of a situation to be in. And since probably just recently, we've actually changed in New Zealand the way the colouring of our placard, especially the green one, we've actually changed it to a white. And the reason for that was that the public actually thought when it had a green sticker it had been inspected and it was green as go, it's good, it's safe. But it was really only a rapid assessment, a 10-minute assessment to say that, yeah, it's okay to live in the meantime. So we've now changed that green placard to a white placard. And what it's saying is that once you've got a white placard that it's okay to live in, that's fine, but you need to get it checked by a building surveyor or an engineer. Next, please. That's just some photos of one of our first yellow placards. And you'll see there, so that bottom right-hand corner, some of the tile roofs. And it was interesting flying into the airport the other day, the amount of tile roofs you've got over here. And it sort of took me back. And probably from a durability perspective, they're great, they're strong and durable, and they'll last a long time. But unfortunately, an earthquake, they turn into a weapon. And you'll see later on in some of the other slides. That one we're just looking at, it was beautifully tended garden, but a lot of obvious damage. Plaster had been shed from the exterior, stone foundations had blown right out, and there were signs of shoring up the walls from the previous September earthquake, and the chimney had come crashing down. Now in Christchurch there's a lot of wooden bungalows, but they've all got brick chimneys, and there's quite a lot of them came down immediately, but quite a few of them were sort of still there, but sort of only just being held together. And they worked out quite a quick way of actually sort of temporarily fixing up was to get a big roll of Glad wrap and wrap them from top to bottom. And that just held them in a safe situation until something could be done with them. And it enabled people to stay living in the house as well. Next, please. Photos below show some unreinforced concrete block walls which have literally torn themselves apart. That's probably, those aren't too bad, but you can see that the devastation and how bad that they get, and it's actually only the roof structure that's sort of holding them all together. Next, please. This is a lot of the houses that the zone I was working in. This is out in Avonside in Christchurch. That top left-hand corner is up in Redcliffs, up out at Sumner. You can see there was a lot of high sort of rocky outcrops came down. And you'll see in the right top-hand corner there the tile roof situation. You can see all those holes in the roofs where the tiles have just gone straight through. So it wouldn't have been a nice place to be when they start coming through. Next, please. This is just some of the damage to the infrastructure, roads, sewerage, and I think Ron's going to give us some statistics on that later on. You can see there's a lot of devastation there. Top right-hand corner, you can see where the manhole off the foul sewage, and that's popped up about half a metre out of the road. That was quite common. It's a bit of a hazard when you're driving around, something to look at. You used to get used to looking for those. Next, please. And this is the CBD red zone. the central business area, and some of the demolition that's going on after the earthquakes. You can see they needed some fairly serious machinery to demolish some of those, and some of the bigger buildings actually had to be pancaked, like putting explosions right around and then just dropping them pretty much where they stand. You can see from the photos this was a fairly serious area, and this is where the CTV building, which was very sad, as Nick spoke about before. There were 115 lives lost in the CTV building, and we've still got an ongoing investigation by the government and the police into the collapse of this building, and there's possibly still charges pending on that one. This is just some more photos from the CBD red zone, just showing the devastation there. I'm just going to talk about, just briefly before I finish, some real life situations that I had with my team, and something that became apparent was the fact that older people, people that had been through the war and seen things sort of like that before, that they coped really well. You'd go into a house and it might be unlivable, but the little old lady at the back would have, because she didn't have a toilet, she'd have dug a hole in the corner of the garden that was going to be a toilet. No complaints whatsoever. Whereas some of the younger generation, walking down the street one day, and I had a young guy about 25 come up to me and say, "Oh, when's the power going back on in our street?" I said, "Oh, I think the electric truck went down there just before." I said, "It's probably not too far away, probably perhaps today, I'm not sure." And he says, "Well, I need to know, it's really, really important." And I said, "Well, have you got a health issue, like a dialysis machine or something that is really important?" He said, "No, my TV won't go." And I got into that sort of mindset. I just about lost it. I'm thinking of dealing with all these people that have lost lives and all these sort of things, and these young people are worrying about the TV not going. It was quite bizarre. And even some of I talked about the teams and the welfare officer and that, and one of our welfare officers was he was an undertaker, and he was a church pastor. And he was a really interesting guy, but we got into a situation where we came across a lady that was a nurse at a hospital, and she was desperately trying to get to the hospital to help out the injured and that, and her car wouldn't go. And this welfare officer said, "I know a little bit about him." He was actually a Salvation Army uniform he had on. He said, "I know a little bit about cars, leave it with me." So we left him there, and we came back about 20 minutes later, and here he was. He'd rolled up his white shirt, he had grease all over it, and he'd managed to get this car going, and this lady was so impressed that she could get off and help at the hospital, and she offered to give him $5. It was a really poignant moment, and it was what it was all about. You were there doing a job and just doing it to the best of your ability. In closing thoughts, I spent 7 days over the 2 earthquakes at the coalface helping out in the city of Christchurch. A very humbling experience. I believe unless you actually spent time in Christchurch after the earthquakes, you'll never realise how bad it was for the city and its residents. They were hurting then on September the 4th, 2015, and the 5-year anniversary now. Some are still hurting. Their lives will never be the same. They are scarred mentally, physically, their homes are destroyed, and some of their businesses, jobs and livelihood. We spent 7 days of our life helping out, seeing, breathing the devastation, but then we could go back to home to our families, a life of normality, and it became a distant memory, but one we will never forget. But now the rebuild has begun in earnest, and the city is emerging from the ashes, new buildings, a renewed spirit from the people. The city is working so hard to get back to its former glory and needs to be applauded for it. The rebuilding a city centre. The successes: establishment of the City Centre Development Unit, agency to lead redevelopment. The 100-day blueprint, Central City Recovery Plan. Key anchor projects including Sports Stadium, Convention Centre, Performing Arts, Health Precinct, Cricket Oval, Justice and Emergency Service Precinct, Central Library, Avon River redevelopment, Metro Sports Facility, Bus Interchange, Retail Precedents, Inner City Parks and Earthquake Memorial. And you'll see with the river just meandering down, and Nick touched on it before, and you'll see the green sort of just out either side of it, and that's none of that land's actually being built on anymore. But prior to the earthquake, it was known as the Strip, and there were restaurants and bars right up to there. So that's no more. So that's me. Thank you very much for your time.